Okay, you guys, I wanted to talk through how I like to work in one of my favorite softwares in the Adobe suite, InDesign. This is the one you learn when you want to be doing the program for your little theater company is magic. Um, InDesign, as opposed to Photoshop or other softwares, Word. Um, InDesign is designed for layout for print in particular, okay? So not for layout for presentation necessarily, but layout for print. The reason that this is important is that any presentation documentation that I create, I want to be able to print it so that then it can be posted on the wall in the rehearsal room, and I also want it to be equally accessible and beautiful in online format like a PDF. And this is a great software to help you do that thing. The other thing that it does, which is fantastic, and this is again because it's an Adobe Suite software, is it's referencing as opposed to actually importing an image, right? So instead of bringing in that document like you would in Word or something like PowerPoint, it's actually just pointing to wherever that document lives. And this is really helpful. It also necessitates a certain amount of organization of your files so that it can continue to maintain those links. You can also relink things if they get lost. Um, so but what it does mean is, like when we were talking about After Effects, those of you who jumped on that After Effects call, if I update some piece of content in this file, like if I update the Photoshop file of the paint elevations, and that then has a new texture on it or a new colorway, that Photoshop file, when I save it, it's going to link back into this document and be updated as well. And so that's why I like using InDesign, because it'll automatically link back and pull from whatever file is the most recent one. You can also replace the link if you need to. So here is my example that I'm showing you right now. This is Lysistrata's research package. It has kind of a bunch of different things going on. Has like a textured background and all of these pieces of research, and also paint elevations and renderings from my Vectorworks file. So that's kind of where we're headed. And now I'll start a new file and sort of show you how to land someplace like this. Okay. I'm not going to do the whole thing over, but I'll do some of it over so that you can see sort of where that all came from. So here we go. File, new. I'm going to do a new document. It's going to do this whole thing. Great. We're going to call it a Lysistrata presentation example. Okay. This little button is going to be like, hey, where do I want to use this preset again, right? So if I wanted to set up a default document, this is where I would do that. I'm going to not do that just yet. I always do a landscape orientation. I also do tabloid size. That's 11 by 17 in a landscape orientation. No, dude, there you go. Okay, so 11 by 17 I like because it's the biggest page that can be printed off of a standard copier. It's general, or like my home printer prints at 11 by 17 because I bought the one that's big enough to do that. So that's why I use that page size. It also looks nice on a screen because it's in horizontal mode. So that's usually where I go there. I do not turn on uncheck this facing pages button, okay? So InDesign is also set up to do books, right? So if you do, for example, a program and it'll do the pages next to each other so you can see what you're doing. It's that kind of a print layout situation. If you leave that facing pages thing, you're going to get two pages next to each other and it's just going to be weird. I can also show you where to fix that later. I let all of this stuff alone. The margins are going to be given, and they're given in this P, so like points, which is, again, if this is all print based, Like it's 66p high. What does that mean in inches? Don't know. Don't worry about it. Okay. Um, and then preview is going to let you see what that page would look like. I don't need to because I know what I'm doing. This would be a good time to save, like once you've set up all of that stuff, go ahead and save it as your research preset, so that then it'll pop up in here as one of your options. Okay, so that'll be kind of useful, or it'll pop up here under saved. Great, we're going to create this file. Cool. So here it is, right? It's only one page long, which is not enough pages. I would make it more pages probably, right? But I can also do that here by clicking on pages. I can add more of them. However many I want, okay? I'm then going to come in and create a master plate, okay? So if you look at this, all of these pages have the word Lysistrata and this little header across all of them, and they also all have this background on them. And that's sort of unifying visually what I'm doing. Do this, don't do this. I like it just because it frames every page. So if you see it individually, you're still seeing branding, what the content of the page is, and then you're seeing whatever it is. And that's because oftentimes, again, I'll print these out and hand them to the stage manager or to the rehearsal room. So then they'll have them, and you want it all to be like, this is the show, this is the stuff about the show, even if the pages are separate from each other. So to do that, I create a master template, and that allows me to apply the same background to each page. Okay, so I usually, this one, if you look up here, there's a little A. It says the A master is applied to all of these pages. I like a cover page, so I tend to apply the none to that first page. So it has a separate look than everybody else, and then the A master gets applied to everything else. To edit the master, right, you double click on it. Yeah, so now I'm in that A master, right? You'll notice it doesn't scroll down pages anymore because I'm inside of that A master page. At this point, this is where having all of my stuff prepped and organized is really helpful. Let's see what I even have. I don't even know exactly where what is at this point. There's a ton of content, right? So I think I want, did I put it in here? Nope. So I buy assets. You would just use a JPEG from your background, but this old dirty paper backdrop is the asset that I used as a background. What happens when you pick up an asset? And this is true either if you pull it in from your desktop or if you're bringing it in from a library like this, is it sticks onto your cursor, okay? And wherever you click becomes that corner of the image, okay? So that's sort of how that would shape up. I'm going to use Command minus to zoom out so I can see a little bit more of the page. There are two controls in InDesign, okay? There's a crop control, which is this blue, or if you double click, you get inside to these orange controls, and that's actually scale, okay? And currently it's letting me, as I click and drag my mouse around, it's moving every which way. If I hold shift, it's going to lock aspect ratio, which is generally a thing I want if I want my images to look, you know, normal. So while I'm editing this orange frame, right, I can play that whole game out. I then click outside of it and I edit the blue frame to change how much of it is actually visible, okay? I also typically will make my background a texture, A of all, and then B of all, I will reduce the opacity of that background texture so it's not quite as punchy, because I just want it to kind of give me some sort of a design gesture without overwhelming everything else. And that's up here. That's this little fader, so I might pull this down to like 60%. So I just blew past the idea of libraries, and I want to go circle back to that real quick, and then we'll talk about doing some other stuff. So here is a Creative Cloud library, right? I spend money and buy graphics from Adobe Stock, right? And they get incorporated into my library. You can also pull your graphics, your images, your whatever, into your libraries just straight out of your files, right? So here's a combined paint elevation. I can bring that into a library, okay? Like this. Add to library? Yes, please. Okay. So then that will become one of my objects in my library. Okay. The bonus to this is, see, it's loading it now. Anything that's living in my Creative Cloud libraries will be available to me from software to software. So if I go into Photoshop, I'll be able to grab the same image that I'm grabbing in InDesign or any place else. So I'm able to just use those assets and also like color swatches from software to software. Okay. So I'm going to now grab this color swatch, right? Bring that into InDesign, adding these colors into swatches, right? So I take my library swatch and I add those colors into swatches. So now if I'm like, okay, I want that pink and that deep yellow to be part of my palette in this InDesign file, I have that control now because I just pulled them in from my libraries. So let's take swatch 7, right? Let's flip it over here so that it's actually the background color and create a rectangle that has that background color to it, okay? So this would be my header, theoretically, for my new version of this package. I'll just kind of play with that scale. And I will also reduce opacity on that a little bit. I don't want it to be so overwhelming. Everything outside of this page boundary is not going to print. That's like an overprint preview. So if you're doing a real print project, right, like a poster, they need a little overprint in order to trim it down to be perfectly crisp on the edges. That's also like when you design your business cards, which you're going to do, right? Because you're going to be a grown-up in the world and have a business card. When you do that, you'll also do an overprint preview on that too. So I'm just going to add one more element. I'm going to add in a little text box situation. I'm doing it outside of there so that I have more control. And I'm just going to type Lysistrata, show title, and blow it up, right? I can either type in, or I can ramp it up this way, or I can no, maybe not. I can drop this down and pick a size. I'll also maybe pick a different font, something kind of, cuter. Let's try that for now, okay? And I'll drop that text box up here, okay? I don't know, do I like that being black? Don't know, maybe I'll change that out for that yellow swatch. Does that do anything for me? Nope, it makes it impossible to read. What if I did it, that yellow swatch, with a black outline? See, now we're getting somewhere. I don't know. Is that better? It's hard to say. Let's zoom in and look at it. I think that's cute. Let's keep it. I can also do all of the text editing stuff that you do in any software. So you have character styles, paragraph styles. That's where you can adjust all of that individual stuff. Okay, this one right here. So when I have it selected and I click up a little bit there, it spaces the letters out a little bit more, and I think that's closer to what I want. You can also just stretch it, and that spaces the whole word. So all of that sort of kerning, Kerning, that's all, graphic design life. You can go on a deep dive into text and how it should look. But I'm kind of good with this. I think it's going to work for me. You do you. Design, right? That's all I put on the master. Okay, so now I'm going to go back and I'll double click onto that, right? Has this A master applied to it. So my first page is different. My rest of my pages all have that master applied, okay? I might double click back into my thing and Control C or Command C, copy all of that stuff, come back out to my first page. This is a great InDesign tip. If you right click, you can paste in place and it'll put all of that stuff in the same place that it was on the previous page. Super, super helpful. Now I can move these pieces around, right? Since this is the title page, I'm going to kind of change it up, make this bigger. I'll minimize that pages view to get it out of my way. Open up this box, right? If I want something to be centered on the page, I'll typically arrange my text box all the way to the left and right edge and then center the text using paragraph, right? So then I'll center that text within that text box. I'll just make that text box full width in order to know that I'm centering it relative to the page. I can put other whatever, right? Whatever I'm wanting to see here. Usually it'll be like scenic design, Lily Bartenstein, or research package, or blah, 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 whatever, okay? I think I also, now that I'm looking at this, I think I want to bring that pink down even a little bit more, and I would just go back into Pages, double click on the master, click on that particular object, and just pull its transparency down, okay? I like this as a background, okay? Cool. So now I'm gonna go back through a bunch of my stuff, right? I can bring in anything from a Photoshop file to an exported flattened PNG. So if we look in my folder again, I have stuff like paint elevations, right? So here's like a paint elevation of a specific element, okay? They were totally updated after this. But if I drag from my folder, once I click on InDesign, it does that same trick, right? Where it's got it pinned to my corner. And now I have brought in that paint elevation, and I can either keep all of this measurement dimension, or I can just zoom in and focus on the actual image, okay? And this would go on a plate that's about my banner, my banners, my painted backdrop banners, okay? The one other thing I did on each of my pages is I created another little text box over here that was the page title, okay? So that is in a different font, page title, right? I have it aligned into that margin, and I use paragraph to snap it to that, to justify it to that side. And then I will copy it, Control or Command C, and I will scroll down, and on each page I will paste it in place, and it will create that copy, right? So copy, click, paste in place, and it's now creating a copy of that on each of my pages that I can update to include whatever, I missed one, whatever the content of that page is about, okay? So those are sort of the overview of using InDesign, some of the basic tools that I'm using and the ways that I'm working with it. This is also really great if you create your collages in Photoshop, if you use some of those mood board ideas and tools that they talked about in that fashion design tutorial on LinkedIn, then you can bring those in, those mood boards in as a Photoshop object or whatever, and figure out how they would lay out onto this kind of a page print version. So once you've got all of that stuff done, file, right? You can come over here, you can export it, right? Or you can print it, right? But if I'm gonna, let's assume I'm exporting it, right? I would export it. I would like it to be a PDF, please. There are a bunch of different options. You can do an interactive PDF. That's if you want to put hyperlinks in there so that people can click on stuff and go places, or print PDF. Both of those are great options. And then the other thing I would do for this specific project is I would also, in addition to exporting it as a print PDF, right? So it's a complete document that's easy to email. I would also export it as PNGs or JPEGs. I like PNGs. They're the portable network graphic. I like PNGs. And those then become image files, right? So that's like a compressed, flattened image file that you can throw up into a website or on Instagram or whatever. So I would also export it as a PNG so that you have a shareable image content, okay? Let's cancel because this is kind of a nothing PDF, right? So those are my tools. That's how I'm using InDesign when I'm laying out a visual research package. Let me know if you have any questions about it, and I will see you again quite soon, I'm sure.